Hey folks, welcome to an episode of the Artenders with Mac and Dan. I am Dan, he is Mac.
Howdy.
We have a lot to get to already, so let's just hit the ground running. Before we start our episode, we need to get some things out on the docket. Two big things.
We're getting married.
One, we are initiating what's called a sleeper pick. What's a sleeper pick? Well, a sleeper pick is for items that we want to eventually review, but they're kind of a little bit too long for us to do on a semi-weekly basis. So we're just like, hey, let's kind of like work on this slowly, and whenever we're both finished with this item, that is when we will review it. So I selected the video game called The Outer Wilds. I believe it came out in like 2020 or 2019, around there, not too long ago. Fairly recent, fairly well-reviewed as well. And I don't know, I haven't played it yet. You haven't played it yet, but we both downloaded it, and we're both going to see eventually what it's all about. And
we'll just slowly pick away at it,
yeah, and whenever we're ready to review it, we will. And then that'll be, after that, Mac selection and et cetera, et cetera. Now,
as is the show.
Yes, but now to affect us more on a regular basis, we talked about it briefly the past two episodes about something called penalty points, is what we're formally going to announce it as. Now, whenever we make these sort of penalties, Mac, you and me, there's a penalty point added to our respective counter.
Right.
And then after 10 episodes, whoever has the highest amount of points against them must go and get an outfit from Party City that is selected, I believe, by the other person. We'll get into the more gritty details of that.
I already know exactly what I'm picking for you.
Okay, well, that's great. So to briefly go over the points that we have agreed on, and this is for the most part only, active when the other person catches the person committing the foul. So plus 1 point if you get a name wrong. So if you say a name wrong and I catch you, like Billy Donovan, when you meant Billy Corbin.
Yes, Billy Donovan, coach
that would
of
be
the
plus
Pacers,
1.
right? Yeah.
What?
Coach of the Pacers, right?
No, the Bulls.
Bulls, that's what it was.
Christ, I mean, I will let
that
this one
wasn't
slide.
one of the fine.
I'm just saying, that was a big
Okay.
mistake. Big mistake. Big mistake.
It's true.
Now, plus 5 if you kill someone. So let's say I say Jimmy Buffett kicked the bucket 2 days ago. That's not true. Not that I know of. Number one, another plus 1 is if you hit the microphone. We like to do that.
Wait, so in that way, should we bring someone, should it be a fine to bring someone back to life?
A fine to bring someone back to life?
Yeah, let's say that Jimmy Buffett actually died, and we just said that he was alive.
Oh, we're going to have to discuss that. That's something to, culminate and think about.
Yeah, I think that's a little less egregious than killing somebody who's
I
alive.
think so.
Yeah.
Plus 1 if you hit the mic. Plus 1 if you cough, sneeze, snort, clear your throat directly into the microphone.
Burp.
The microphone, yes. If the microphone catches it, fine, it happens. But, if the active effort is made to turn away and avoid the microphone, by all means, that is A-okay. Plus 1 is a bad mistake that needs to be addressed in the next episode.
Yeah.
We'll address one that, we'll say for this episode and how it relates to Dark, but we won't count that as a penalty. It's against you, boy.
No, I know.
Plus
I'm
2.
often the one that's going to be getting the mistakes and corrections. I'm fully aware of that.
But who knows? Who knows?
Hey, but now that's
the world is
competitive.
our oyster.
That's
yes,
exactly right. It's all up for grabs.
Yes. And then plus 2, because of course this is more egregious than getting a name wrong or anything like that, is when you disrespect the show. So for example, instead of saying I have a sizzle serve, you say I have a hot take, and that's just not allowed.
If we have structure, we must abide by that structure. They are the laws of the show.
No, because then if we don't abide by laws, the structure that we have in civilization, there is chaos.
Absolutely. If we set conventions, we must follow them.
We're reviewing a Netflix television show, entirely done in German. No, you do not need to watch it dubbed, Mac.
That was the mistake.
You can watch it subtitled, which is what I did.
Mm-hmm.
It is a show called Dark. There are 3 seasons of Dark. We watched the first one. I watched it for the first time. Mac watched it for the second time.
Yep.
And it is a show about a small town in Germany called Winden. And it's not really much of a spoiler. It's kind of like the linchpin of the show. But there's time travel on different but there is time travel, paradoxical events involved. And how this town is sort of breathing and living throughout these like 8 days in November or so, I believe. And in 2019, in 1986, and in 1953. And yeah, that's kind of it. And then but the biggest thing about it is how paradoxical it all gets and how everything is intricately related and how many secrets everybody in this town has.
Yeah.
Mac.
Now, we want to make sure on the front end, though, that before we start the rest of this episode, that we make it clear that because so much of the show is plot points, it's not as much developing character and feeling things. It's more plot points. Because of that,
Okay. Yes.
there are going to be so many spoilers.
Yeah.
That's just a given
Well, that's just
of
the nature.
this.
So
Yeah.
so then I
more
like,
than other episodes. I mean.
yes, I want to like immediately sort of like qualify that a little bit more by saying that how it felt like the show was written was they put all the plot points first on the board.
Yeah.
And not only just like the plot points for like just the story in general, but also how the characters interact with one another per se. So I guess like a really big example is how like Ulrich from 2019 is the one to beat the shit out of Helga in 1953.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so like then after they figure out all those plot points, that's when they start filling in those characters and filling them with life. And I think you can kind of see it here and there of like, oh, there's like not really a lot to this character. Like you really see it with the Tiedemann family, primarily with Alexander and Bartas and a little bit of Regina in 2019. But like that's the thing that we sort of experience from that. I think that's a fair thing to say when it comes to this show. And I think this show is really, really well done, and I think the acting is superb, and I actually find the characters to be very engrossing for the most part. But I just want to get that on the front end as well. But Mac, I wanted to talk about also, why did you pick the show? What was it about this show that you really wanted to bring to the table, and how is it different from other television shows that you have experienced?
Why was this the one? This was the one because it is maybe one of the most impressive shows in terms of just the sheer quantity of questions that it forces the audience to have, and how effectively they're able to answer all of those
questions in regard to the plot, or questions in regard to like thematically. Okay,
plot. So in terms of like questions on the world, and because I don't think that there really has been a time, at least in my viewing experience, you can chime in with yours if you'd like. In my viewing experience, there were definitely no times where I was relating this to the real world or trying to make any real world applications, or there wasn't really much self-reflection that was done in this series. A lot of it was escapism for me, but not necessarily just in that, oh wow, this world is beautiful and I just want to live in this world with these characters for a while. It's less that, and it's more me desperately trying every minute of the entire freaking show to figure out what exactly is happening.
Yeah, I mean, I told you before we started recording where, thank you, Mac, for sharing with us that you got an email. I really appreciate that. That has to be a penalty. Like, that has to be.
Well, we didn't put it on the freaking list. We can put it on the list.
All right, we'll put it on the list. It won't count this time.
But now we know.
But now we know that's definitely a penalty if your phone or computer.
Okay, and that's actually true because there are definitely times when we get calls and it's not.
Yeah. Yes. Point being, I completely forgot what I was going to say.
Damn, I am so sorry.
I just remembered
the plot points.
I just remembered. Yes.
Yeah.
How you were consistently trying to figure out aspects of the show as opposed to just like thematically letting it unravel. And I was telling you before we started recording that my notes, folks, are not necessarily for the most part notes about like the actual quality of the show. My notes, I would say 90% of them are just me like trying to figure out what the hell is happening. And it's just like, I just wrote things like, is Mikkel Jonas's dad? Oh my God, I really nailed that at the beginning.
Wow. Good for you.
And then my very first note that I wrote down was, is Mads the dead boy? And I was correct.
You're right.
Bridge between past and present, Doppler effect. That one I wrote down because there's a family called the Dopplers.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was just unrelated.
Also,
stuff like that.
Some extremely biblical names, which we'll get into.
I mean, yeah, there was a character named Noah, and he was trying to build an ark, quote end quote.
Yeah.
That one.
A passage. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I guess the form of transportation from one time to the next. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I will say, and I talked to my dad about this because actually my dad and sister were the ones that got me into the show in the first place, right? And it was because they were also so impressed with the way that the show was clearly storyboarded before they started, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about how, the first 2 of 3 seasons in this show they had to know exactly what was happening from beginning to end before they even wrote the first word on a script.
Yes, and it's very clear also how, without even seeing the second season yet, how much the first season depends on the second season, purely because of how the first season ends. It doesn't really feel like the first season is its own like cohesive thematic story.
Yeah.
It has its own story, of course, but like how sort of like in the void, the first season ends with Jonas in the future. Spoiler. It very clearly needs the second season to continue the story.
Right.
Which is
and that's really like honestly, I didn't feel like the end of the first season was much of a cliffhanger because it wasn't any more of a cliffhanger than any other episode.
But I would not call the end of the first season a resolution.
Right. Exactly. What I'm saying is that I think what's so smart about the end of the first season is that the realization or the big climax of season 1 isn't any crazier than any other episode. So me going from season 1 to season 2 is just a no-brainer. It's almost, in my mind, it's almost, now having seen all 3 seasons, in my mind, the first and second seasons are one season. Like, I don't really like slice those 2 seasons as separate things.
Well, and I think the big thing for me, I like this show immensely. The more removed,
you do good. Thank you.
Well, but the more removed I am from it, the more I enjoy it. Right after I finished the final episode of the first season, I was disappointed because there was no resolution.
I see.
It didn't feel like the first season was being tied up necessarily.
Right.
That what it was. You see how I did that?
That was good. That was
my
a good.
throat away from the microphone.
Yeah.
I am a pro. But and that was my biggest gripe for the first season, that it didn't feel like it was trying to tell its own story. It felt like the entire first season was a setup for whatever the second and the third season is.
Yes,
and that's my biggest gripe with the show. That what we were getting all the payoffs for, the plot-wise payoffs of like Mikkel being Jonas's dad, of the stranger actually being Jonas from the future, et cetera, et cetera. All those payoffs had to do in and of itself, because all it was paying off for was we haven't even explained it, the trifecta sort of timeline that they're working with. So the show approaches time travel as not necessarily a beginning and an end, but rather a sort of triangle where you can go to the past and to the future from the present in a way. But so the idea of it is that it began in 1986 and you can go back to 1953 and you can go forward to 2019 and all of it is intricately related.
Yeah, so rather than thinking of time as moving on one timeline, and there being 1986, 1986 in the middle, I suppose, 1953 over here, and then 2019 over here.
Yeah.
Think of them more as 3 separate things running on top of each other.
And they literally use the Celtic knot as like the image for that, which is like the perfect image to use.
Which that knot is rendered somewhat pointless by the end of season 1, the very last moment of season 1, because then you realize that
Jonas was teleported into the future.
Yeah. So the whole idea of the 3 has now been, it's just dissipated.
And when I say the future, I mean 2052. 52. Thank you.
Yeah.
But the thing is that because the entire first season, except for that very last moment, was just focused on that, let's just call it the Celtic knot of those 3 timelines. Everything that was payoff was just payoff to further reinforce that there is no choice. That choice is an illusion. And so the question that you're asking yourself the entire show is, are they actually making choices, or is this just how it's always going to be, right?
Yep.
Which, because, of course, then you get into really tricky territory when you're writing characters, because you're like, you really have to make this make sense for the characters. And if not, your audience is out, right? Because then you're thinking, oh, this character would not do this. That only happened a couple of times, and we can get into that a little bit later if you really want to. But that, I guess I was bothered because of how that was structured. Everything was paying off towards that knot. There was no resolution. And so then it felt like the central takeaway or the theme of the first season was, oh, there is no such thing as choice. And I don't know if it's because, like, I disagree with it, or because there was no resolution, or it's just, like, not, it's kind of lazy thematic storytelling. I was really turned off by that.
But by just the idea that no matter what anyone did, it was going to happen.
Yeah. Well, and doubly so when towards the very end, instead of us having the discovery of like, oh, Jonas from the future was actually the one that started all this when he was trying to end it. Yes, that's a paradox. They address that.
Yeah.
And they just kind of accept paradoxes because you have to.
Right.
In a way, in the structure for this, right?
Well,
like
also
once,
it kind of
once
gets
those
you
writers
excited.
accepted paradoxes, then they were like, oh, wow, this entire thing just blew open.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and as an audience member, whenever you are given a paradox, because you trust them so much and you've learned to trust the writers so much, like over the course of the series, you are less like, oh, that's weird and that doesn't make any sense. But you're kind of excited because you're like, oh, I am excited to see what the explanation for this is going to be. Yeah. Like I said earlier, like it just keeps offering you so many questions, and you get excited because you're like, I know that I'm going to get answers, because they're really, really, I'm not going to say like brilliant writers, but definitely effective writers. Yes. Efficient.
Yes. But machines. I was also largely bothered by the fact that instead of us having that discovery of later Jonas making that, we just had Noah tell us. Noah's like the main antagonist, who we don't really know at this point what he's doing or why he's doing, like why he's trying to make a time traveling thing. Like we did, like, it really feels like Noah is an antagonistic force that just isn't explored, and I would much rather them not have Noah be present at all, or just have Noah be 100% 10 times more present, because it just felt like, oh, this is just something that was shoehorned in to have a villain to cause all the events to transpire in the first place. That's what it felt like to me. But like, I'm sure it's explored a lot more in later seasons. Yeah. My gripe is it wasn't explored the way that I think it should have been for this season.
Okay, yeah. So I think this was the Go ahead.
I just remembered. But also Noah says that what Jonas, later future Jonas, is about to do isn't going to work, instead of us making that discovery. Sorry, that took me 5 minutes just to say that one sentence. Yeah. But it was like, this is a great time that you can show and not tell, and instead you decide to tell really lazily. That's kind of lame.
Sure, but it actually, like, for me, that actually gets me kind of excited, because then I'm like, okay, well, in the mindset of Jonas, then I'm sure that he is now going to try to not do the thing that he was planning on doing, do something different, and now his decision has been changed by the fact that someone told him from the future that what he's about to try is not going to work. Does it make any sense?
No, because Noah was talking to Bartas.
Oh, yes, you're right. Sorry. Well, another thing that I need to make clear in this episode is
it was
that,
so unexplored during this season. He's just kind of there.
Yeah, that's my least favorite character. Flat out least favorite character. Easily.
At least Alexander has interesting eyes. The 2019 Alexander. And
I was about to ask which
1986
version of Alexander. Yeah.
Impeccable casting.
Oh, isn't it so cool?
Okay, it's not gonna lie, it's some of the best casting you'll ever see. It's funny that
because they're all playing the same character, but they need to be separate actors. It's
because really the only time it doesn't work is both versions of Regina, But I mean, we're talking like both versions of
Yeah.
Ulrich look so much. I mean, well, we're talking like resemblance and
Yes.
sort of like intonations wise. Both versions of Ulrich so insanely
Yeah.
spot on.
Yeah.
It's if you told me that they were related, like
Yeah.
2019 Ulrich is the actor is the father of 1986 Ulrich, I would believe you.
Honestly, funny enough,
I'm sorry that I've derailed
No.
you 20 times. Please keep going.
funny enough, I actually think that my least favorite casting was I guess we would call it 2052 Jonas.
Sure.
Slightly older Jonas, 33 years older than main character Jonas.
Correct. Love Jonas.
Because full beard. Because he isn't. There's quite a few things that Jonas does that is just so contradictory to younger Jonas, and I'm sure that like that is taking into consideration that like Jonas does change over time, but and all these characters change over time, but to change that much, I think is taking us too far away from what the story is telling us about Jonas. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. But like you can't. Are you saying? I'm so sorry. Are you saying that he doesn't resemble Jonas enough?
For me, I think that
Because if he did, then we would know like a lot sooner. You know,
Uh-huh.
I mean, like I was just doing the math and I was able to figure out that the stranger is Jonas from the
quite a
future.
bit, right?
But like, if you're not doing the math,
Yeah.
then you shouldn't really figure it out until much closer to the end.
No, it's less about that. It's less about like you're being able to know that it's him, and it's less about the way they look. It's more like the portrayals of both Jonas in my
They look
mind
unrelated. They look
are a little disjointed.
completely different people as opposed to like different actors, but the
and
same
so like
character.
for instance, we can tell that there is a 33-year difference between the two Ulrichs, and that he has changed a little bit, but at their core, Ulrich is Ulrich.
Yes, at their core, Katerina is Katerina.
Exactly.
At their core, Hannah is Hannah.
Big time. And love the character of Hannah.
Yeah,
But
awful person.
awful person. So fascinating though.
Yeah.
But at their core, Jonas, I think they're a little different, a little too different for me.
Okay.
So there's that. But also, I wanted to ask you, were there any moments in this first season, and I'm going to tell you there will be in the second season, but were there any moments in this first season that you had to pause to mentally catch up with what was happening?
I don't think so.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's primarily because I had this notepad right in front of me the entire time that I
Right.
should have been
literally
using.
could take notes.
Yes, exactly. So anytime I had like a thought that was like could be that felt like I was on the right path
It
towards
was
something.
easily organized.
Yeah. That I just wrote down Gretchen in all caps, question mark, question mark, question mark, you know?
Yeah.
And then I figured out that the present is 1986, right? And so, yeah, it's just stuff like that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
even wrote down is the stranger Jonas. You
I
know?
will say, because they do this several times in the show, and I appreciate this like a motherfucker. The
Grandpa had bloody sweater. Tronta, it's Tronta.
Right.
Tronta had a bloody sweater.
Yeah.
I couldn't figure it out until the end. It looked like, hold on, there was a really fast. I thought Tronta killed Mikkel for a second because Tronta looked like he had a sweater that looked like it was from Mikkel, and because there was a picture of Mikkel that looked like he had the same sweater, and there was blood on that sweater, so I was very confused. No, I guess it was just the sweater that Tronta was wearing anyways. Sorry, continue.
I never even thought about that. The they keep showing you a wall because there are two characters in the series that have this like web of like all the names of everyone, and like they're keeping track of the families, right? Because this whole entire story centers around just a few families, and there are these huge family trees that you can see from generation to generation. Whenever they show you quick glances of that wall, that's where I pause and will like read every name and look at every picture just to be like, do I know that person yet? Yes. Do I know them? Okay. And this person is this, and this person is this.
The thing is, I did do something like that. Now that you mention it, I looked at the cast list on IMDb. I did not do it for like the entire show because then I knew.
I was about to say, yeah.
Well, because then I knew that could potentially.
Huge spoilers.
I hit the microphone. That's +1 for me. Ding.
I'll write down.
It's fine. And well, yeah, sure, write it down if you'd like. But so I knew that I could potentially spoil myself just by names if I looked at just the general show on IMDb. So then I just, selected an episode in the first season. And the only time because it helped, because it was just a lot of names being thrown at you really quickly. So I was just like, I just need to tie names to faces. I just need like that second, right?
Yes.
Not necessarily a second to catch up plot wise. It
Yeah.
was a second of like, who the fuck are these people and how are they related?
Yeah.
That's what it was.
That makes sense.
I figured out, I think before I was supposed to, that Mikkel is Jonas's dad. Like for pretty confidently, just by, there's Mikkel. There's a character named Michael. That's strange.
Right.
It felt
Right.
it was like too much of a coincidence
Yes, that makes
for
sense.
me to like
Yeah.
kind of not notice. So that was the only time like it backfired. And I felt kind of upset because I was just like, I feel like this shouldn't have backfired, but it totally did.
Yeah, right.
That's what it is.
And to address your earlier point about the way the way that season 1 feels like it's just there to set up season 2,
And season 1 is a giant puzzle.
Yes, true. But I think what might be a small downfall of the writing and setup of the show is that they take a little too seriously the 3-act structure. So because there are 3 seasons, it's very, very clearly inciting incident, turning point, climax.
I see.
And so really all of season 1, no matter how exciting, which we can agree, season 1 was exciting.
And
they do a good job.
For the most part, really, really well done.
It really was. But the problem is that they can't get away from the fact that season 1 is, at the end of the day, exposition leading up to inciting incident.
Yeah.
Inciting incident being
There are even
one.
some moments of that, of like, I think the biggest one, there are some like unexplored plot points, which I'm like, shit, you can't have that.
Yeah.
Like the biggest one to me was Hannah calls Alexander. She knows that Alexander is not actually Alexander. He's this like criminal from a long time ago, and has like a different identity, and like uses that as blackmail because he is currently the CEO of like a nuclear corporation that basically powers the town of Vinden.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, hey, because she's upset and bitter, I want you to take down Ulrich. And that's just not explored at all.
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen. I don't know if it's even going to happen because there's just a giant black hole over the city. Whatever. But
well, also,
but it was like that was mentioned, and it was like nothing was explored in that.
Ulrich, yeah, and then Ulrich goes back, and so you're like, so is anything gonna happen to him now? Like, is he gonna come back? Yeah. It's a big, I don't know. And honestly, I would say that Bartosz is probably my least favorite character, followed very closely by Alexander.
Well, because them two, and then also I don't even know their name, and I don't know what pronoun to use, so I'm just gonna say there. But the sex worker that lives in that trailer, it felt like for the most part, all 3 of them, in varying degrees, just felt like plot devices to progress a story, as opposed to like actually being characters.
Yes. Okay, I actually have some comments on that, but I would like to address those when we come back from a word from our sponsor.
That was fast.
I know. All right, and welcome back. Sorry, I'm never going to do that again. Don't worry, I'm never going to do that again. Danny, don't you worry. Don't you worry. I want to start this one off with, I so greatly apologize to our listeners that we got so excited by our new penalty rules and games and a sleeper pick and all that stuff that we forgot to mention one of the most important milestones that we have that we have in this show's history. And that is that this is our 50th episode, Danny.
Yeah, we kind of forgot about that.
Danny, this is our 50th episode.
That's if we count like the Remember the Titans episode that we released as our first episode, but then we deleted it. But good thing we uploaded another Remember the Titans episode. But regardless,
True.
like if we're counting that as number 1, then this is indeed Mac, our 50th episode.
50th episode, Danny, congrats.
Congratulations, my friend.
You better put
excellent work.
Oh, I don't think we've ever shown the handshake on the show.
Well, no. Well, I mean,
Oh, and it might have been behind the globe just then, so I don't think people even saw that.
it's just our little thing.
Yeah, no one ever.
Okay,
knows
hold on.
about
Stop.
this.
Time out.
What?
For the audio listeners, because Christ, I always have to play defense around
That's
you.
true. That's
For
true.
the audio,
Yeah.
for the audio listeners, Mac and I just did our handshake that we've been doing for years. We did it in front of the camera. However, it looked like our handshake was behind a globe that we
Right.
use in our set, quote end quote. So yeah, that is
Was
what
the
occurred.
set put in quotes? You mean?
Yeah, because I would hardly call this a set. This is my living room.
I think this is a set. I
We
think
set it up.
I think that globe is as much of a set as
You
it
wanted
could be.
to talk about Bartas. I'm not entirely sure of the pronunciation.
No,
so
yeah, so,
forgive us if we butcher them.
Yeah.
Because I mean, at least I heard these pronunciations all in German, so
Sure.
that's all I'm
sure.
going off of.
I was under the impression that it was Bartosz.
Did you watch this dubbed?
I watched seasons 1 and 2 dubbed, and then I watched season 3 subbed.
Okay, and then when you
Rewatched it. I rewatched it in subbed.
okay, before we continue
Yeah.
the characters conversation about those three, how did that compare?
It honestly was way harder to follow subbed.
Really?
For me, reading it was more difficult.
Sure.
Yeah, like I think that's partially because just like the way that I watch stuff, and because this was like a more time consuming piece because it's like a full length series. I had to watch it not while doing other things, but I had to watch it like while my mind was like coming down off of work or things like that,
Sure.
and hearing it said while I'm watching it in English is a lot easier for my brain to keep up with.
Totally
You know
fair.
what I mean? Like
totally
if I was
fair.
zoned out.
And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but I will say this: the dub for this show is much better than most dub that I've seen.
That's very
It
good.
was really impressive.
That's really good because it's a lot trickier when you are doing it off of other human performances as opposed
Yeah.
to an animation. Entirely different beast.
Oh yeah,
So it's
and at first it was a little cringy, but then you definitely get used to it.
that's neat. That's
Yeah,
cool. I
yeah.
like that. That's awesome.
And they definitely had their own performances, which was
Yeah.
really cool.
And with that
the
being
breath
said,
work of Hannah. Whew. Whoever dubbed Hannah, I have no idea. Awesome job. Sorry, go ahead. I just want to
try to
throw that
make
one
a
out there.
point before we end the episode to find
Hannah.
whoever
Okay,
dubbed
sure.
Hannah.
Let me see if I can find the
Especially since like you
Dubcast.
you don't have to worry about getting into spoiler territory, that you can
true.
do that, with
True.
in peace. But even though, because I understand, it makes perfect sense that it was a little bit more difficult rather, to follow when it is subbed because you're reading the entire time. Totally fair. With that being said, I don't know German, obviously, but from what I could tell, the sort of like language adaptation was really well done. It also helps that like English is a Germanic language.
Yeah.
And so there are a good amount of times that you're literally just hearing a word that you're like, oh, I know that word. Like, it's the same word in English, it's stuff like that. But as well as I remember like hearing, we're bringing this back to Squid Games, but I remember hearing some stuff about Squid Games, how it's like the translation and the adaptation, it doesn't like make sense for like the stakes
Yeah.
of the character in that moment, and
Right.
just felt kind of corny, the lines that were provided through subtitles. I never had that thought experience here. I thought each character's language was provided very clearly and very well through the subtitles. Mac, do you have anything to report, or do I need to
Yes.
filibuster a little bit
No,
longer?
no. This is very interesting. The voice actress or actor, I suppose, that did the Hannah Conwell that I'm referring to, which is
Which is the 2019 Hannah Conwald?
the 2019 Hannah
Yes,
Conwell.
because we see Hannah as like a 14-year-old girl in 1986, and then we see her as a mother to Jonas, an adult woman, in 2019.
I'm actually really glad you said that because I totally misread and saw
Do I need
a
to filibuster? Do I need to filibuster?
You might, yes. Yeah,
Okay,
for a second.
so but with all that being said, I will start tying this back to those three characters. Those three characters are really unexplored. When I'm saying three characters, I mean Alexander, Bartosz, I believe, and the sex worker. Yes, Mac. We're back to him.
Oh, I'm worried that I'm going to get a fine for mispronunciation, but you don't know the correct
Well, I
pronunciation.
mean, no, but it's not like Billy Donovan to Billy Corbin.
Sure.
If you are
Shawnee?
actively trying to pronounce a name that you're not entirely sure, and I can't correct you, fine.
Shawnee Atias.
All right.
That's the best I
Like,
got.
as long as you get it out there that
Yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce this name, you're fine.
But these are things that I did not know. The same person that played 1986 Hannah Conwald and 2019 Martha Nielsen, same voice actress.
Nice work.
Same guy that did 1953 Egon
Uh-huh.
and Michael Conwald from 2019, same dude.
I mean, which are only like 2 lines from Michael, so that's not
Well,
really,
yeah.
you know.
But
terribly
I mean,
thing.
either way, that's just weird. There's a lot of
Yes,
double ups.
but that is a common thing for a lot of projects that involve
sure.
dubbing. It's just like, oh, you have
we
like
have
this
like
kind of
a
range.
company of voice
Yeah.
actors that we're just gonna.
It's
plug
so
in.
much easier that way, especially when like doubly so when you have 2 characters that are not like in the same space. It's a lot easy to get away with.
Yeah.
I was about to tie it to a story that's completely unrelated and a little bit narcissistic, so I'm not going to
why
do
not?
that.
I
Okay.
like your stories, Danny. Narcissism.
Okay, fine. Oh, really fast. Okay, there is a Dynasty Warriors game that had a completely different voice cast. It was Dynasty Warriors 9. It was very poorly voiced over, and it was, I think, a new voice direction team, and they didn't really know the structure of the characters. At one point, there was an actor who was cast for 2 characters who are basically like best friends, meaning they're next to each other like the entire time, which would not have worked. Unless he had a ridiculous amount of range, which I'll tell you, nobody did. And which is fine, it happens, but like they just should not have been cast for that. And yeah, so that's just an example of like you want to avoid that. You want to not have one actor play 2 characters that are constantly next to each other because you're gonna hear it. It's gonna look like a mirror. Do we want to begin to finally tie it back to these 3 characters that we wanted to talk about? Bartosz, Alexander, and the sex worker.
Yes.
Because they felt like plot devices. They felt like unexplored characters. They only felt there in the service of other characters.
Yeah.
Right? But I felt like Bartosz was only there to have Noah have somebody to talk to have, you know, his grandmother have someone to talk to.
Yeah.
In order to sort of create that wedge in between Jonas and Martha.
Right.
Like it's stuff
it's
like that, right?
Annoying. I agree. Bartosz and Alexander are annoying, but the sex worker, I will say, is kind of an special example for me because there are several examples throughout this entire series of characters that really would be just like one-off plot devices in any other series, but I've actually been extremely impressed with how Dark has been able to give very full scenes to side characters.
Yeah.
There's literally not a part, and this is exactly what I told my dad and my sister, there is not a single part in the show that I wouldn't be very excited to play.
That's fair. I think it's very different from The Wire, right? When you have something like The Wire that even though those are meaty scenes, those meaty scenes are only like 30 seconds long. They're really short snippets that even though there's a lot of character and a lot of life in those scenes, very short. The issue that I'm having is that I think the scenes are great, right? But it's like, it's sort of how those characters serve the story. And I feel like they're only there to serve the story as opposed to they have a role in this town. They're living this life, right? I think that's generally unexplored where comparing it to something Dark, the show, comparing it to something like Broadchurch, for example, primarily the first season, it felt like much more of like a living, breathing town that had people in it, you know, and these people serve a role in this town and in this community and are actively affecting one another. That example doesn't apply as much to Alexander because everyone is always keeping Alexander in mind because of the nuclear plants. But but I think that was something that was really well done by Broadchurch that wasn't as well done in Dark because of having more characters sort of serve the story. And then it's also Dark is primarily mostly about like 3 families.
Yeah.
it's about this town, but really it's about these like three families and how they're sort of interconnected in this town.
Which you were saying you had a little bit of a problem with.
I do a little bit, right? Because then it makes the setting feel a lot smaller. You know, it's already a small town, which is great. I am a sucker for small town settings because it's just naturally drama is hyped up a lot more.
Yeah.
Because
everyone knows each other.
Everybody knows each other and everybody knows each other's crap. And so it's hard for stakes not to be naturally a little bit higher, right?
Yeah.
But then because of the entire time travel nature of it and how much the writers wanted everything to sort of be interconnected and interplaying with one another and overlapping with each other, right? Then you're only going to really have like three families that are actual players in this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, like the fact that like how much the Conwald family is so deeply related with Ulrich's family, the Nielsen's, I believe their names are, how deeply related they are. But then the issue then is that you don't have a lot of characters outside of those families. And as for those characters, they aren't really explored, right? Outside of the Nielsen's, Conwalds, Dopplers, and Tiedemans, you don't really have anybody else, period, except for what? Noah and the sex worker?
Yeah.
Like who there's not.
Yeah, I can't
a
really
lot.
think of other examples from season 1.
It's just those families,
Yeah.
right? And so that's a little bit of the frustrating part for me. I understand like that's just kind of the nature of it because if you're gonna have all this interconnectedness, then like it has to be about these families.
Yeah,
right?
I think that. So yeah, so the whole idea of the fact that they're trying to keep the themes of the story within this box of generation, or keeping it generational, I think is probably a good idea.
Yes.
As well as if we're reminding ourselves that season 1 is mostly exposition, then it does make sense why they had to keep it so tight within this thing. But I think the one way in which, because I agree with you, the whole family thing is tough for me as well. The one thing that really defies that comment, though, I think, is that the further or the longer the show goes on, the more, because technically, Jonas's dad is a Nielsen.
Yeah.
I think because of that, the longer the show goes on, the further and further Jonas gets away from the families.
Okay.
So it's less about like, there's these 4 families, but then Jonas is kind of like an independent party.
Sure, I understand that. Talk about the first season.
No, you're right, but I'm saying even
we're talking about the first.
No, I know. Even in the first season, though, Jonas.
Remember to the Goblet of Fire.
Whoa, wait. I think even in the first season, they're starting to do that, though.
Okay.
Like I think even in the first season, Jonas says something along the lines of like, what do you say? It's something along the lines of like, I wish that, I feel like I'm the one that is at the center of this. Like if I wasn't here, then everything would be okay.
He's in the dark. Play the Seinfeld.
Boo.
But the problem that I have also partially with that, it's how the show is framed, right? That the show wants to present that it's so much about this town.
Yeah.
When what it's actually about is like these 3 families. That's
see.
part of it
Sure.
too, right? I don't necessarily. I should have got this out better on the front end. I realized that.
Eye patch guy.
What? What was your joke?
Eye patch guy. Eye patch guy is another one of the characters.
Eye patch guy?
Yeah. From the police station?
Oh, that's right. Eye patch guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Jesus Christ. You need, like, I forgot
which,
he
may
was
I
there.
say, is another example of another Alexander plot that was opened and is so far from ever, like, they never talked about it ever again.
Him having an eye injury?
Him having an eye injury.
I mean, I'm
and
totally
then
fine with him having an eye injury and
No.
having that just be a given circumstance.
Right, but specifically him, like, having some sort of formal relationship with, or, like, wanting to, like, give information to Alexander.
Sure.
It's
Yeah,
like,
I mean...
Why is that happening? And then it never... yeah.
Well, I mean, that one I'll let a little bit more, like, slide a little bit more. Hell, I mean, I even think something like Ulrich's and Katarina's oldest son, Magnus, and
Yeah.
and Franziska, who is the daughter of the police captain. Quote, I'm not sure.
Yes, I
what-
think she
yeah.
is.
Like those are also like more unexplored characters that you would think would be a lot more like affected and like at play with the going ons, but like they just felt so much to the side because they weren't really intrinsically related to the main plot,
Yeah.
which was time fuckery. That it felt like they were just cast aside.
Yeah.
You know.
Time fuckery. I like that.
Yeah, it is a bunch of time fuckery, but
It really
but
is.
I mean, so what I should have said was I'm fine with the show really just being about. I said 3. It's actually 4 families.
Yeah.
Right. I'm fine with that. But it's just the framing of it, right?
Mhm.
Of like, we want to believe that this show is about Vinden. It's not about Vinden. It's about these 4 families and how they got fucked by this time conundrum,
Yeah.
right? I guess that's the biggest thing. And so then when you finish the first season, you're like, this whole thing, like not the whole thing, but there are plenty of avenues and streets that feel unexplored. I'm supposed to believe that this is a living, breathing town, and I saw very little of it because of how much it focused on the families and on the time stuff, which is fine because you want a tight story, but then it goes back to the framing of it all.
Right. For you, I guess I have 2 questions here. One, did you have any gold medal performances?
Yeah.
And 2, what character, if any, would you want to take a stab at?
Okay. I don't like getting into the me wanting to get a stab at as characters. I don't know why. As I get older, I'm like, I'm not like,
interested in putting myself in that.
Oh, but like what I'm more interested in is like whatever role I am given as opposed to me going after a role.
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, but that's just my POV, and that's just like for me to like keep myself like humble, I guess, or not necessarily humble, but not like spiteful or anything. Like I want your role, you know,
like
I want that.
Trying
part.
to view every role as equally interesting, so that you're not getting hopes up for things.
Yeah, I mean, I did a show recently, and I was convinced for the long time I was not the main character, and finally in the middle of like performances, I'm like, wait a second, I'm in a lot of the show. Am I the main character? Like, like something like that, right? A little bit unrelated, but related tangentially. So very large non-answer. I don't like getting into that because it's kind of pointless. I mean, I guess like somebody my age, like I guess like Jonas has a lot of meat to the bone.
Rephrase.
You know,
which character do you think is the most interesting written character? So I guess what is your gold medal performance and what is your gold medal character?
This character and performance is
both.
one of the same.
Oh, can I guess what it is?
Sure.
Is it the older Ulrich Nielsen?
Yes.
Yeah. That's right up your alley.
So
that's very you.
Assuming that I am pronouncing this correctly, Oliver Masucci, who plays
Italian, right?
I don't know.
He's Italian. Go ahead.
You can say that for certain?
For certain. Go ahead. Yeah. No, call me out. Try it, please. I absolutely fucking dare you. Please. Put a point on me.
Who looks a little bit like Mads Mikkelsen. Anyways,
Mads.
I'm not gonna play this game. He was in Doctor Strange. He was Hannibal Lecter in a TV show.
Oh God. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Okay, there we go. And Oliver Masucci plays 2019 Ulrich. Uncanny resemblance to the kid who plays 1983 Ulrich as well. Excuse me, 1986 Ulrich. Awesome. I think his arc of the show is easily the most well explored, the most interesting, the most fun to watch. There was never a moment during the show where I'm like, oh, it's Ulrich, he's on screen. No, I was so glad. He outperforms, not to say like other people are performing poorly, but he's doing so well that he outperforms a lot of people that he is on screen with.
Yeah.
And we're talking about this journey of like this humble dad that has a bunch of secrets and how it's what it is for me. It's the physical manifestation of these secrets being explored, right? So it's the physical manifestation of his son disappearing. It's a physical manifestation of like, but then there's this other kid in the forest, and then him figuring out, oh my god, this other kid is actually my brother from 33 years ago that was teleported to now. And then the physical manifestation of figuring out, oh, Helga Doppler actually 33 years ago kidnapped these kids. And then Ulrich goes back in time to 1953, physical manifestation of finding Helga Doppler when he is like 12.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I kill him,
yeah,
I can stop this.
Takes the rock.
It's the entire exploration of that is just a treat to watch. I wish, it's hard to say because he's such an emotional, I hit the microphone, he's such an emotional fury that I wish he would have put together, wait a second, I'm giving him the same scar that Helga has in the future. Huh! You know?
Yep.
But with that being said, and he doesn't, confirm the kill. Rookie mistake. Whenever you kill someone, you gotta confirm the kill.
Have you never seen Zombieland?
Have you never just, like, killed a cockroach? Like, you gotta confirm the kill.
Confirm the kill. Poke around a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah,
like, check the pulse.
It is so bothersome that somehow, after beating him like 20 times with a rock, that was not the death.
Yeah. I will let that slide. I will not let slide Ulrich not confirming the kill. Rookie mistake.
True.
What I will also not let slide is just older Jonas logically thinking, oh, if I just blow up this device in here, that'll work, even though older Jonas would definitely know anything that would break the cycle would break the cycle. Something as simple as Jonas meeting Mikkel in 1983, right, to pick him back up in order to prevent, like, Jonas from being born. Like, that's fine because it breaks the cycle.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But
older Jonas is a dumbass.
Here's
what I'm trying to say.
Is that...
And Ulrich is fantastic.
You right there, I think, is why this show is able to stay afloat. Because you were talking about how the most frustrating part is that that the theme is telling you that no matter what anyone does, everything's going to be the exact same.
Right.
But
you need to supply those choices that make sense for the characters, so you never feel like, this is writing bullshit. You have to. You have to, because then you lose the audience immediately. Why would I want to watch something? Why would I want to watch a show where a bunch of characters do shit that doesn't make sense? Why would I want to watch that? Why would you want to watch it? Why would anybody want to watch that? That's boring as hell. But when you have these actions that are properly motivated for the characters that also play into, they're not actually making choices, that's a lot more interesting. So then when a character does something that doesn't make sense, it's a lot more egregious because it feels like it's just for the sake of the plot.
Sure, but
which is very rare, but extremely rare for the show, which is impressive.
Yeah.
But when it happens, and it'll happen like once-ish, twice, it feels really dumb. Like, older Jonas is stopping Jonas from picking up Mikkel in 1983 because he won't be born, but if he wasn't born, then everything would fall back, like everything would be normal, theoretically, right? Why would older Jonas stop that? He has such a large stick up his ass to blow up this cave or something.
Yeah.
That it's like, it doesn't make sense. That even Jonas from 2019 is like, why won't you let me out? What are you doing? You're making no sense. You can stop this right now. And so, of course, then you have to have, I guess that is explored in later seasons, but it's frustrating to watch those characters' choices because that character's choices does not make sense right there and then.
I see.
That we're just supposed to believe that they don't make sense. It didn't feel like those characters' choices are properly motivated. And when the only sort of POV that we have for that character is that he's Jonas from the future and he has marks from a noose, which we presume he tried to kill himself with. That's all we know about that. So when you have choices that are not properly motivated in the moment, then it just feels like bullshit. Even if they're explained later on, but like, you got to be cohesive in some manner within the season. You know, the season has to be its own storytelling beat.
Sure.
If you lean too much on the future, but it's the sort of thing of like, luckily it wasn't, but what if the show was canceled after the first season?
Then so many moments just wouldn't make right. Well, but I think that's what I meant whenever I was talking about how that's what makes the show so unique and so different from any other show I've ever seen. Is that is that it offers so many more questions than any other show.
Getting a phone call? I mean, like
I am, and that's a fine. Now, so yeah, now it's up to
yeah. Do you have a gold medal really
Danny
fast?
2, Mac 1. Do I have a gold medal real fast? I actually
Also, we're in the 2-minute warning. Beep, beep, beep.
2 minute warning. Whoa. Okay. I don't have a specific gold medal. If I was to give the gold medal, it would be to the English dubbed voice actor for Hannah.
Okay.
Because she did a very good job. But that's the only one that I actively thought of. There was nothing else that I
Yeah.
really brought to the table.
Yeah.
Now, final thoughts on Dark.
This was a very well done show. The few mistakes or the few errors, I guess, that occur in this season are pretty large because of just how the structure of everything is. I don't like the theme that it ended on. I don't think the season necessarily, like, it's really, really well done, but because from what I've been told how much it leans on that 3-act structure, it feels like the entire first season is set up, which is kind of lame.
Yeah.
At the same time, the setup itself is immaculately done. It can be both. So Dark is both absolutely brilliant and fantastic, and it's also disappointing at the end because there is no resolution, and I just feel like if you have a season of television, there's got to be some level of resolution at the end in some capacity. Mac?
I would say the exact same, but specifically that you should not pay attention to the season ends or beginnings if you're going to watch this show. If you watch this show, don't pay attention to when season 1 ends and season 2 begins. Just let the story take you, and just strap in for the ride. Like, give up on trying to predict anything. Just let it happen. Danny, what are we watching next week?
We're gonna watch a comedy special that is actually on YouTube. It's a comedian from Australia named Randy Feltface. The special is called Purple Privilege. What's interesting about Randy Feltface? He's a puppet.